Buying a home is one of the biggest investments you will ever make, and one wrong move, one wrong decision could cost you thousands of dollars. In this video, I'm going to share with you some pretty big costly mistakes that buyers have made. Yeah, the whole purpose of this is just to help you avoid them and just dodge that bullet of spending thousands of dollars. There is a lot that goes on with buying a house, and it's extremely overwhelming, and I get it. And I make these videos to help educate consumers so you can then advocate for yourself when you're buying a home. So therefore, I just want to share with you these mistakes you need to avoid. And I'm even going to share with you some personal stories throughout my career of things that I've witnessed of some mistakes that were made or potentially could have been made, but ended up dodging a big bullet. So let's get into it right now. The first mistake you want to avoid is if you see a house that's listed for sale, but the seller is saying the house is being sold as is, and they're not going to make any repairs, do not feel that you have to run away from that house and not bother looking at it or put an offer on it. Now, hear me out on this. I've seen this a lot where people are just like, oh, I don't want to talk. I don't want to deal with that. The seller's not going to make any repairs. You are entitled to a home inspection. It is your right to have a home inspection on that property. And even though the seller's saying they won't make any repairs, if something pretty big shows up on that inspection report, say the roof is bad, there's a foundation issue, there's an issue with the chimney, they're going to have to address that, because if they say, forget it, I'm not going to sell you the house, I don't want to make any repairs, they're going to move on to the next buyer. They have to disclose the defect that was identified on that inspection report. So they're going to have to tell the next buyer, like, this is a problem with the house. They have to disclose it. And then what's going to happen? If he says, I'm still not going to repair it, the next person's not going to buy it. So here is a perfect example. Early in my career, I represented a seller. She had 2 fireplaces in the house. One of the chimneys, it was determined it was in very bad condition. The buyers brought in a chimney inspector. The lining needed to be replaced. The mortar on the chimney outside between the bricks was breaking down. It was in bad shape. And she was unwilling. At first she was unwilling. She's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not giving any credit. They want to buy it. They can buy it. I never used a fireplace, so be it. But I'm like, okay, we live in North Jersey. In the wintertime, 90% of the people use their fireplaces. Okay, just saying. But anyway, that was her. So what happened? Well, I explained to her, now we have to disclose this to the next buyer. She was ready to walk away from the deal because she's like, I'm not going to repair it. I said I wasn't going to repair anything. But when I said to her, look, this is a major defect, and could also potentially prevent somebody from getting homeowners insurance. This is a big deal. So luckily, between myself and the attorney, we were able to convince her to offer a credit back to the buyer to repair the fireplace. And thank God she did, because if I had to put that back on the market, I would have had to put it on at a lower price to make up for the cost to repair that chimney. So everyone was happy at the end, and it all worked out. I'm telling you this just to keep this in mind. If the seller's saying as is, they're not going to repair, a lot of times they'll end up either repairing it or they're going to offer you a credit. Keep that in mind. This could cost you getting your dream house if a seller is saying they're only selling it as is. Don't be deterred by that. Another big mistake that you should avoid is not checking with the town to see if there are any open permits on the home you're buying. This is a big one. Now, I know a lot of people do this, but I've heard stories where some people didn't even think to do that. Here in northern New Jersey, we have attorneys that are also involved in a real estate transaction. So the real estate attorneys are the ones who typically go to the town and file what's called here in New Jersey an OPRA request. OPRA meaning Open Public Records Act. They will file that request with the town to request all the permits, any open or closed permits. Now, any person can do it. You can actually go and request them yourselves. So wherever you're watching this from, whatever state you're in, just check to see what the procedure is with your town or local municipality to see what the procedure is to request permits. This is extremely important because you cannot take the seller's word for everything that they're saying about the house. This is part of the due diligence process. So you need to pull those permits. And I have a great story to share with you as to why it's so important to pull these permits. I just had a deal recently where my buyers had the home inspection, part of the home inspection is an oil tank sweep. You've heard me talk about these oil tank sweeps and the underground oil tanks. They're very big here in New Jersey because back between the 1940s to 1970s in the Northeast, that's how people pretty much heated their homes. They were using oil, but they would bury the tanks underground because they're kind of unsightly, right? So they would put them underground outside the house. Okay, fine. Now, over the years, as people were converting to natural gas, they would decommission the tank or they would remove the tank out of the ground. A lot of the times they would decommission the tanks, meaning they would drain the oil and fill that tank with sand, call it a day. Okay, let's go back to my clients. Now they're doing their home inspection. They do the tank sweep. Nothing came up. Okay, no oil tank. Great. While that was going on, their attorney filed an OPA request. Guess what came back? There was a permit for a decommissioned oil tank. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So come to find out that oil tank was decommissioned prior to the current owners owning the house. So back when they bought the house, they were just given the paperwork, the permits to show how the oil tank was decommissioned. So I guess they forgot to mention that in the seller's disclosure that there was a decommissioned tank. But thank God we pulled the permits. Otherwise, my clients who trusted this oil tank sweep inspector, they'd be living in this house right now with a decommissioned tank and not even knowing about it. So P.S., the sellers were kind enough. They went and removed the oil tank. So all was well. Everything worked out fine. But again, this is the importance of pulling permits on a house because you can't rely on everything that the seller is telling you. Hey, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that if you are looking for a real estate agent, whether you're selling or buying in your area, you need to be connected to somebody. I got a lot of connections. I know a lot of people, so I'm happy to help connect you with an agent in your market. Click the link down below in the description box, fill out the form, and I will get back to you within 24 hours, and I'll help you get connected to an agent in your area. Another mistake that you should avoid is not checking to see if there are any insurance claims filed on the house. Bet you didn't know you could do that, but oh yes, you can. There is a report. It's called the CLUE report. CLUE stands for Comprehensive Loss Underwriting Exchange. And this report, you can request it for free once a year. So when you're buying a house, you can request one of these reports on the house that you're purchasing to see if there was any claims filed on the house for, say, water damage, fire damage, wind, if a tree fell on the house, or if the house was vandalized, if it flooded. You can see all this. The purpose of doing this is to help you identify any hidden damages in the house. Now, it's great you all have your home inspection, but checking for these insurance claims is a big thing. This could identify some pretty huge problems with the house. You can go back to the seller to have them provide all the documentation that the repairs that were made were done by a licensed contractor. If you feel that those damages were too much or the house is at risk for further things like such as storms and wind and things like that and flooding, that's a big one, then that could help you determine whether or not you want to move forward with the sale. So this is a big one that could save you thousands of dollars. Another mistake to avoid is not shopping your interest rates. Yes, when you're going for your loan, talk to multiple lenders. Just as I tell you when you want to hire a real estate agent, you need to speak to 3 agents. Same thing with the lenders. And there's 2 parts to this one that I want to share with you. Number 1, you shop the rates out. Now, I have a preferred lender I refer to my clients all the time. Sometimes they end up not going with him because they talk to a different lender or a bank and they were able to get a lower rate. And look, it happens. And I encourage my clients to do that. Shop the rates out. Okay, but the second part to this is the timing of it. If you're going to shop your rates, do this while you're in the middle of your home search. And then once you get your offer accepted, you get under contract, then you can make a decision on which one you're going to be going with. I've seen it before where people are, in the middle of the transaction, say there's several weeks into the transaction, and they find another lender who has a lower rate. And now they want to go work with this other lender. Meanwhile, your current loan is in underwriting. So now you got to start that whole process all over again. And that could be a big problem because that could then delay the closing and your seller's not going to be happy about that. So you could risk jeopardizing the deal should you switch banks in the middle of the transaction. Now, look, there's some sellers will be very accommodating. If they're flexible to closing, that's fine. But just be aware, there are some sellers that are not going to be happy about that. So this is why I'm telling you, if you're going to do it, you're going to shop your rates, do it while you're actively seeking, like identify a few banks and lenders, watch their rates daily. And once you get to that point where you're under contract, then you can turn around and choose one of those lenders that you've been watching. Here's another quick story for you about shopping rates. I had clients several years ago. You ready for this? They were working with my lender, but then they found a big name bank that was offering a lower rate. And they decided to go through the process with both banks. I'm not kidding you. They paid for two appraisals, one from my lender, one from this big bank. They must have spent about $1,400 on appraisals because they were going to wait till the last minute to decide like who had the cheaper rate. I thought that was insanity. I've never heard of anybody doing that before, but apparently it has happened. My lender told me that he's seen people do this before where they have working with two different banks. But at the end of the day, they ended up going with my lender, even though the other bank promised them a lower rate. Once they went through all their underwriting, come to find out, the big bank, was not so honest about that lower rate. Once they went through their credit and all the things, they ended up charging them a higher rate. So they ended up going with my guy. Yeah, I don't know if I recommend that because you're laying money out for two appraisals and that gets expensive. So that was kind of crazy. So yeah, I wouldn't go to that extreme, but just shop the rates out and identify some banks who you want to work with, who you think you would work with, and then make that decision once you're under contract. Another big mistake you have to avoid, and I've seen this, oh my God, do not buy a new car, lease a car, open up any credit cards, buy furniture before you close. If you're in the middle of a transaction and you're getting the itch that I have to open up a Home Depot credit card or a Lowe's credit card because we have this house we're buying and we need to buy all these things, oh my God, wait till after you close. Now, this hasn't happened to any of my clients over the years, but I have heard stories from colleagues. Oh, good Lord. What happens is when you open up a new credit card, or if you say take on a car lease, that's going to impact your credit and the loan will not get approved. Yeah. And then you lose the house. Not a good scenario, not a good situation to be in. So please take my advice on this one. Do not feel like you have to go order the furniture in the middle of the transaction. Please wait till you're closed because it will cost you. It will cost you the house. It will. So just avoid that big mistake. I hope you found this valuable and I hope this information will help you avoid these major costly mistakes when you're buying a house. Thank you so much for watching me today. To get your dose of real estate reality, my name is Jackie Baker and I will see you next time.